The murmur in the courtroom was just a soft hum, like a river flowing beneath the surface. But when the heavy wooden door creaked open, everything went silent. A woman with a weary face, simple dress, and trembling hands crossed the threshold with slow steps, as if each one cost her a small internal battle. Her name was Clara Ramirez, a neighborhood seamstress, invisible to most, but with a dignity that could be felt in the air. Eyes fell on her with a mixture of pity and disdain. Some court employees exchanged mocking glances. The judge, Alberto Salazar, adjusted his glasses and frowned when he saw her. Without a lawyer, he muttered with annoyance. For him, this case was just a formality. Another poor person to be effortlessly crushed by the system. Clara took a deep breath, not out of fear but from the weight of knowing she was alone. Or so it seemed. What no one in that room knew was that fate had prepared a scene worthy of a movie. A story of prejudice, of misused power, of deceptive appearances, and of true justice. A story that began with a humble woman being humiliated, but would end with an unforgettable lesson. Stick around until the end, because what you're about to witness will not only move you, but could change the way you see people. If you ever doubted the value of humility, this story is for you, and if it touches you as much as it did us when telling it, subscribe to the channel. Stories like this deserve to be heard. Now let the trial begin. The clock struck 9 when Clara crossed the threshold of courtroom 3B in the municipal courthouse. The atmosphere smelled of old wood and old papers, with a bitter hint of bureaucratic indifference. The white light from the ceiling fell mercilessly on the benches, making each shadow seem like a silent judgment. She walked slowly, her cloth bag clutched against her chest. She wore her best dress, the least worn, and a pair of shoes that were once black, now with scuffed toes. Her hair was carefully pulled back, although some grey hairs escaped, rebellious. With each step, she tried to convince herself that she could face what was coming, even though her body betrayed her nervousness. Her hands were sweating, her heart was pounding in her temples. In the room, 2 clerks whispered as they sorted files. One of them glanced at her sideways and barely concealed a mocking smile. To them, Clara was just another poor woman with rent problems. The prosecutor wasn't even present yet. Only the judge, Alberto Salazar, a man in an expensive suit, burgundy tie, and thick eyebrows that seemed permanently furrowed, occupied his high seat at the back, observing her with disdain. "Mrs. Clara Ramirez," the judge said without raising his voice, but with a tone so dry it cut through the air. "Where is your lawyer?" "I don't have one, Your Honor," she replied, her voice a mere thread. "But I brought my receipts and—" "Receipts?" Salazar interrupted, flipping through the file without looking at her. "This is a trial, not a market fair. You need legal representation here. Understand?" Clara nodded silently. It wasn't the first time someone had made her feel like her voice was worthless. As she took her seat, her gaze timidly swept across the room. To her left, a tall young man in a security uniform stood rigidly, oblivious to the human drama unfolding. To the right, a middle-aged woman slowly cleaned the windows, trying not to attract attention. It was as if everyone present already knew the outcome before it even began. One more who would lose without even fighting. Clara opened her bag and carefully took out a stack of papers. Some were a bit wrinkled from days of worry, but they were important: payment receipts, transfer confirmations, and a letter from the landlord signed months ago, where he promised to repair the apartment's heating, something he never did. "Here I have proof that I have paid up to the month of February. And I also want to say that Mr. Ernesto—" "Silence, Mrs. Ramirez," the judge interrupted coldly. "That will be seen when the plaintiff arrives. In the meantime, refrain from making emotional pleas." Clara lowered her gaze. It wasn't her intention to cry, but tears blurred her vision. Not out of pity for herself, but because of the palpable injustice that was beginning to envelop the air, like a thick fog. She wanted to shout, explain, defend herself, but everything seemed to be against her. The back door suddenly opened and everyone turned to look. A court assistant entered and announced, "The plaintiff is about to arrive." The judge nodded impatiently, while the clerks resumed their murmur. Clara remained motionless, looking ahead, her fingers clinging to the edge of the bench, as if that simple gesture would prevent her from crumbling. At that moment, she didn't know it, but every mocking glance, every arrogant comment, every ignored paper were just the prelude, the prologue to a story that was about to take a completely different turn. What would come next would make everyone in that room remember that day for the rest of their lives. The sound of firm and confident footsteps echoed in the outer hallway before the courtroom door opened. Everyone turned their heads at the same time, as if a greater presence had just entered. It was Ernesto Del Valle, Clara's landlord. Tall, hair perfectly combed back, custom-made Italian suit, and a perfume that invaded the room like a declaration of power. He walked with a calculated, almost theatrical confidence. In his right hand, he carried a leather folder, and in his left, a briefcase that didn't even seem necessary. His presence was imposing, and he knew it. He greeted the judge with a sly smile and a gesture of familiarity that did not go unnoticed. "Good morning, Your Honor," he said, as one speaks to an old acquaintance in a private club. "Mr. Ernesto, it's a pleasure to see you," Judge Salazar replied, with a smile different from all the ones Clara had received. That small exchange was enough for Clara to understand that she was not facing a fair trial. It wasn't just a difference in classes, it was an invisible network of friendships, favors, and power that wove the threads from the shadows. Ernesto sat elegantly on the bench reserved for the plaintiff and opened his folder as if he were about to give a lecture. "Mrs. Ramirez owes me 5 months of rent," he declared bluntly. "I have been patient, but it's too much. The contract is clear, and what is fair is fair." Clara tried to intervene, but the judge raised a hand. "You'll have your turn, ma'am. Please be quiet," Ernesto continued, his tone perfectly rehearsed. In addition, several neighbors have filed complaints, disturbing noises, accumulated garbage, misuse of common areas. "We are not just talking about a debt. This is an impossible coexistence." The murmurs in the room started again. Clara felt as if each word was another brick on her back, sinking her into a pit from which she could not escape. She looked around for a friendly face, someone who would listen to her. But all she found was indifference. Ernesto took out a sheet of paper and held it up to the judge. "Here are the notices delivered with a signature of receipt. The lady has been duly informed of the eviction process. We only ask that the law be followed." The judge nodded, as if everything was settled. "Do you have anything to add, Mrs. Ramirez?" Clara stood up with the folder of papers in her hand. Her voice trembled. "Your Honor, I have paid every month. These are my receipts. And regarding the complaints, I have never had problems with my neighbors. I don't understand where those accusations come from. Besides..." "Ma'am, please. We are not here to debate perceptions," the judge interrupted, taking the sheet that Ernesto had handed over. "There is enough evidence here. What there isn't is legal representation on your part." Clara felt the room getting smaller. As if the air was fleeing from the corners, the judge didn't read the papers she brought. He didn't check her evidence. He didn't even give her the benefit of the doubt. He only listened to Ernesto. The landlord looked at her with a satisfied smile. It wasn't a smile of victory. It was of superiority, as one who knows they can crush someone without consequences. To him, Clara was not a person. She was a formality. As she returned to her seat, Clara pressed her lips together. She wasn't going to cry in front of them. She wouldn't allow it. The judge paused. "We will proceed to hear the plaintiff's witnesses in the next session. In the meantime, I suggest, Mrs. Ramirez, that you consider a voluntary departure from the property to avoid complications." Clara nodded slowly. Not because she agreed, but because she felt that at that moment any more words would be like talking to the wind. And yet, something inside her was beginning to change. The room fell silent as soon as the recess was announced. Judge Salazar rose slowly, adjusting his robe with the same arrogance with which a general adjusts his medal. Ernesto Del Valle put away his documents with parsimony, without disguising the satisfaction that the trial's development caused him. Clara remained seated, her gaze fixed on an invisible point in front of her. Her folder of papers trembled on her lap, but no longer out of fear. but out of a bitter mixture of powerlessness and contained rage. She felt that justice, that great word, was actually a suit tailored to those who could pay for it. In the distance, the court usher, a man in his 50s, tanned skin, tired but kind face, watched her closely. His name was Andrés Morales, and he had been working in that same room for more than 20 years. He had seen hundreds of cases pass before those same benches, and although he was no longer easily surprised, something in Clara's attitude touched a forgotten chord. Andrés approached cautiously, pretending to review some files on one of the nearby benches. He muttered in a low voice, barely audible, "Ma'am, don't you have anyone to defend you?" Clara raised her eyes, surprised by the genuine tone of his voice. It took her a second to react. My husband was going to come with me, but he had a setback. He told me he would do his best to get here." "And does he know about law?" Andrés asked, looking discreetly to the side so as not to attract attention. "Yes," Clara replied, lowering her voice a little. "He was a judge years ago. He retired, but now he works in something else. He doesn't like it to be known." Andrés looked at her skeptically at first, but something in the calm and honest way she said it made him nod with respect. He didn't ask any more questions. He just said, "I hope he arrives soon." Clara thanked him with a small smile, one that wasn't drawn on her lips, but in her eyes. Meanwhile, Ernesto strolled through the inner hallway of the courthouse, greeting acquaintances and making calls with his mobile phone. His voice was loud, almost theatrical. "Yes, the case is done. The lady doesn't even have a lawyer. Tomorrow I'll get those people out of the apartment." Clara managed to hear him, and although each word was like a splinter piercing her pride, she remained firm. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes for a moment. She thought of her small garden, the sewing machine by the window, the photos of her children framed in the living room. She wasn't willing to give up. The judge returned with a cup of coffee in his hands. He sat down listlessly and cast a fleeting glance at Clara. His face remained impassive, but his mind had already issued a judgment. He wasn't the type of person who reflected much once he formed an opinion. Shortly after, the secretary announced that the recess would conclude in 20 minutes. The room slowly began to fill up again. Some curious people had heard about the case and approached to witness what for them was just entertainment between lawsuits. Clara, however, barely noticed them. Her attention was on the entrance. Her gaze went back and forth, fixed on the door of the main hallway, and then a faint rumor began to run through the air. At first, it was just the distant sound of a powerful engine. Then, the sudden change of attention in the faces of those near the window. Something or someone had just arrived. The usher Andrés narrowed his eyes and peered discreetly through the crack in the door. What he saw left him momentarily motionless. A black Rolls-Royce, impeccable, had just parked in front of the courthouse. The people outside were beginning to gather, curious, murmuring with astonishment. Clara didn't know it yet, but her husband had arrived, and with him a new stage was about to begin in that trial, one that no one, absolutely no one, could have anticipated. The murmur grew like a wave, first on the sidewalk, then in the hallways of the courthouse, and finally inside the courtroom. Everyone turned towards the main entrance as the door opened slowly. A tall man, of elegant bearing and firm walk, crossed the threshold. He wore a dark blue suit without a single wrinkle and a watch that shone discreetly under the perfectly fitted sleeve. His hair, grey at the temples, was combed back with sober elegance. The steps of that man resonated with a silent authority. He didn't need to raise his voice or demand attention. His mere presence imposed it. In his hands he carried a thin black folder without logos. He advanced without haste, as one who knows that time is on their side. Clara stood up slowly, her lips trembling and her eyes filled with tears that did not dare to fall. It was him, Marcelo Ruiz, her husband. A name that no one in the room knew yet, but that would very soon leave its mark on the walls of that court. Andrés, the usher, could barely hide his surprise. Not because Clara hadn't told the truth, but because the scene he was witnessing completely shattered the expectations everyone had made of that simple woman. Marcelo approached Clara and, without saying a word, took her hand gently. She nodded, and he looked at her tenderly before turning to the bench. "Your Honor," he said in a deep, serene voice. "Marcelo Ruiz. I represent Mrs. Ramirez from this moment on. Here is the authorization signed by her. I request to be formally integrated into the defense." Judge Salazar remained motionless for a few seconds. The surprise on his face was as evident as it was uncomfortable. He did not expect this turn, much less the name. A slight nervous tick ran across his left eyebrow. "Marcelo Ruiz," he repeated, as if he needed to confirm that he had heard correctly. "Correct," he replied, extending the sheet with the legal authorization. "My credentials as a lawyer are in order, and I have sufficient experience to handle this case, if there's no objection." Salazar swallowed hard. He knew that name. Years ago, they had met at a judicial conference. Marcelo was an honest, incorruptible judge who had left the system before being swallowed by its rot. And now he was standing there as the defender of the woman he himself had scorned just minutes before. "No objection," he finally said, trying to regain his composure. "Proceed, Attorney Ruiz." Marcelo walked to the front with a confident stride. He calmly opened his folder and extracted a document. "To begin," he said, handing it to the clerk, "I present bank transfer receipts for the last 6 months, all in the name of the landlord, Mr. Del Valle. Dates, amounts, and references are clearly specified." Ernesto Del Valle frowned. He crossed his arms, uncomfortable with the abrupt change in the hearing's pace. "Also," Marcelo continued without looking at Ernesto, "I present a lease agreement with a clause that Mr. Del Valle omitted to mention, the landlord's obligation to repair structural faults, which was never fulfilled." The room was in absolute silence. Each word fell like a stone into a calm lake, generating ripples of tension. The judge leafed through the documents, uncomfortable. He said nothing. "And finally," Marcelo added, "I have written statements from building residents who deny having filed any complaints against Mrs. Ramirez." Clara watched everything in silence. For the first time since she entered, she didn't feel like the ground was shaking beneath her feet. Marcelo's presence not only balanced the scales, it tipped them. The judge took a breath as if trying to regain control of the situation. "Very well. We will review all of this at the next session. This hearing is adjourned for today." Marcelo turned to Clara and whispered, "This isn't over. But now we're on equal footing." She could only nod. Outside, the Rolls-Royce awaited. But what had truly entered that courtroom was hope. News of the man with the Rolls-Royce spread through the courthouse hallways like wildfire. Clerks, guards, and even lawyers from other cases cast curious glances as Clara and Marcelo left the room. For many, it was simply an oddity. For others, a mystery. Who was this elegant man who had appeared like a lightning bolt in the middle of a silent storm? Clara, still holding back her emotions, walked alongside him down the hallway. Marcelo offered her his arm, not out of courtesy, but as a symbol of support. She took it timidly. Although they had been married for years, she had never felt more protected than at that moment. Upon reaching the building's lobby, they took a seat on a discreet bench next to a large window where the midday light streamed in golden shafts. Clara stared outside at the black car that still gleamed under the sun. "Thank you for coming," she murmured. "I thought you wouldn't make it." Marcelo gently squeezed her hand. "I've never let you face the world alone, and I wasn't going to start now." Clara lowered her gaze. She knew he wasn't an ordinary man. Although he had led a discreet life in recent years, his story was marked by a past that few knew, and many feared. Before retiring, Marcelo Ruiz had been a federal judge. His reputation was impeccable, just, incorruptible, and feared by those who manipulated the system. But his honesty earned him powerful enemies. He was the victim of political pressure, veiled threats, and smear campaigns. He decided to resign when he understood that the system he served no longer represented the values he defended. Since then, he had exchanged the robe for silence, exposure, for anonymity. He dedicated himself to private consulting, humanitarian projects, and above all, taking care of Clara. He had chosen a low profile. Not out of cowardice, but out of wisdom. He knew that sometimes the most difficult battle was the one fought without witnesses. "I didn't want everyone to know who you are," Clara said, as if guessing his thoughts. "That's why I didn't say anything. I didn't want them to think I was hiding behind you." Marcelo smiled. "You're not hiding, Clara. You fought alone as much as you could. And you did it with a strength that few possess." She looked at him, her eyes moist but firm. That was one of the reasons he loved her. Her humility was not weakness, but courage in its purest form. Minutes later, they left the building. The Rolls-Royce driver greeted them with a slight nod and opened the rear door. Clara hesitated for a moment before getting in. She knew that everyone outside was watching her, some with admiration, others with envy, a few with disbelief, but she no longer feared their judgments. Inside the car, the air was cool and the silence comforting. Marcelo opened his briefcase and began to organize the documents he had presented. His mind was already working on the strategy for the next hearing. "Do you think the judge will change his attitude?" Clara asked cautiously. "Not necessarily," Marcelo replied. "Salazar is stubborn, and he's more committed to this Ernesto than he appears to be. But if he continues to show bias, we'll force him to declare himself incompetent." "And Ernesto?" Marcelo paused, closing the folder. "We'll confront him with evidence, not assumptions. Everything he does from here on out has to be recorded. We're not alone anymore." Clara nodded. She didn't need any more explanations. Just having him there, she knew that things had changed. The city continued its course outside the car windows, but inside that bubble of leather and silence, Clara understood something essential. Her life had taken a turn. What began as a humiliation was gradually transforming into something much more powerful. It wasn't just the defense of her home, it was the vindication of her name, and Marcelo was ready to fight by her side, with the wisdom of his past and the strength of his present. The courtroom had a different air that morning. Although the furniture was still in the same place, and the walls retained their bureaucratic grey, something had changed. Perhaps it was the attitude of those present, or perhaps it was the latent expectation that floated like static electricity in the atmosphere. Marcelo arrived early, with his black briefcase perfectly aligned under his arm. He greeted the usher Andres briefly with a slight nod. Clara, by his side, looked more confident than before. She didn't speak much, but her posture, upright, firm, was proof enough that she no longer felt alone. Ernesto del Valle entered minutes later, more serious than usual. He no longer walked with the theatrical arrogance of previous days. Although his suit was just as impeccable, there was a slight tremor in his movements that betrayed his concern. He glanced at Marcelo sideways, like someone calculating the risks before making his next move. Judge Salazar took his seat without greeting anyone. He reviewed some documents with a stern expression, avoiding eye contact with Marcelo. The atmosphere was dense. Everyone knew something was brewing. "We continue with the case of Mrs. Clara Ramirez against Mr. Ernesto del Valle," he announced in a firm voice but without conviction. "Attorney Ruiz, you may proceed." Marcelo stood up calmly. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't rush. He only spoke with the serenity of someone who knows that the truth is on their side. "Your Honor, on this occasion we have brought certified copies of the transfers made by my client, all with stamps from the issuing bank. In addition, I include screenshots of the landlord system that demonstrate the receipt of said payments." The judge took the documents and leafed through them quickly. His face hardened. They were clear, irrefutable proofs. "Also," Marcelo continued, "I present a letter signed by 3 residents of the building who assure that they have not issued any complaints against Mrs. Ramirez. The alleged bad coexistence mentioned by Mr. Del Valle therefore lacks support." The clerk took note. Ernesto began to fidget in his seat, crossing and uncrossing his legs. His clenched jaw was the only indication of his growing discomfort. "In addition," Marcelo added, opening a new folder, "we include copies of the lease agreement where it is established that the landlord had to carry out structural repairs. Clara informed in writing, and with evidence, that said clause was ignored for more than 6 months. This could constitute breach of contract." A murmur ran through the room. Even the employees who normally barely paid attention now leaned forward a little, attentive. Judge Salazar raised an eyebrow, uncomfortable. The evidence was too solid to dismiss it. And Marcelo knew that each movement, each word, forced him to act with more caution. "Does Mr. Del Valle have anything to say?" the judge finally asked. Ernesto cleared his throat and tried to regain his composure. "You see, maybe there was a misunderstanding. I don't deny that some payments arrived, but they weren't complete. And about the complaints, it was a general comment from the neighbors, not something formal." "Do you have proof of that?" Marcelo interrupted him. "Any complaint, document, audio, or email?" Ernesto looked at him coldly. He had nothing, and everyone knew it. "Not at this moment," he admitted with annoyance. "Then I ask that that accusation be removed from the record," Marcelo stated. "It cannot be sustained without evidence." The judge nodded without enthusiasm. He was beginning to lose control of the process, and he knew it. Clara watched in silence, her heart beating strongly but serenely. She was no longer just a spectator of her own trial. She was a woman who resisted, sustained by the truth and by the man she loved. When the session was adjourned, the judge barely murmured, "We will meet again in 3 days to conclude the hearings. The court will review all the documentation presented." Marcelo calmly gathered his papers. As he left, he turned to Clara. "They just took a step back. They can't hide anymore." Clara nodded without needing to say more. She knew it. For the first time since it all began. The trial was being reversed. On the day of the new hearing, the tension was palpable. This time the courtroom was more crowded. The story of the humble woman and the Rolls-Royce husband had circulated among employees, assistants, and even on local social networks. Some came out of simple, morbid curiosity, others because they sensed that something important was about to happen. Clara sat with the same quiet dignity that already characterized her. Marcelo, impeccable as always, leafed through his documents with surgical precision. Ernesto, for his part, seemed restless. He had arrived alone, without his usual smug smile or his mocking tone. The trial no longer belonged to him. Judge Salazar entered with a serious demeanor, perhaps more tired than other times. He looked at those present with a slight gesture of discomfort and took his seat. "Let's proceed with the presentation of the new evidence," he ordered. Marcelo stood up with a folder in his hand. He walked to the center with a firm step, his voice as calm as it was sharp. "Your Honor, this time we not only bring evidence related to the lease agreement and the payments made, we also bring relevant information about the plaintiff, Mr. Ernesto Del Valle." The judge looked up. Ernesto shifted in his seat. "As stated in this documentation," Marcelo said, handing a sealed envelope to the clerk, "Mr. Del Valle has been reported on 3 previous occasions for similar practices: threats of unjustified eviction, falsification of evidence, and, in one case, extortion of an elderly tenant in a vulnerable situation." A murmur erupted in the room. The judge took the envelope, opened it, and began to read the documents. Silence became absolute as his eyes scanned each line. His frown deepened more and more. "These complaints are registered with the public ministry," Marcelo continued. "2 of them remain open due to the defendant's failure to appear. The victims are willing to testify if this court deems it pertinent." Ernesto clenched his fists. His face, usually immutable, began to contort into a grimace of annoyance. He was not prepared for this. He didn't think Marcelo would investigate so thoroughly, or that he would have the courage to expose him in open court. "That has nothing to do with this case," he suddenly shouted. "It's defamation." "It's context," Marcelo replied without flinching. "Pattern of conduct." And the court has the responsibility to know the plaintiff's background, especially when there are indications of systematic abuse of the judicial system. The judge settled in his seat, took a deep breath, and for the first time addressed Ernesto in a different tone. "Can you respond to these accusations, Mr. Del Valle?" Ernesto hesitated. "No, I haven't been convicted. They're just empty complaints. Anyone can write a letter. 3 different complaints, 3 different people, and now this lady," said the judge, pointing to Clara without looking directly at her. "Is it a coincidence?" Ernesto no longer responded. He looked to the side as if searching for an exit that did not exist. Marcelo seized the moment. Your Honor, in light of this evidence, I request that the plaintiff's credibility and the validity of the process initiated against her be re-evaluated. The judge nodded slowly. He could no longer ignore what was in front of him. I will review the background presented and a decision will be made at the next hearing. For now, this court orders an immediate suspension of any eviction action against Mrs. Ramirez until further notice. Clara closed her eyes for an instant. It was the first clear sign of justice since it all began. Ernesto, mute, gathered his things clumsily and left the court with his head down. His haughty figure had shrunk. He was no longer the invincible man that everyone feared. Marcelo approached Clara and took her hand gently. She looked at him without words, but with gratitude in every gesture. At that moment, everyone present, including the judge, knew that the mask had fallen, and a deeper truth was beginning to reveal itself. The echo of Ernesto's footsteps fading down the hallway still resonated as the room slowly began to empty. However, something had changed in the atmosphere. It was no longer just the story of a rent dispute. What was at stake was much deeper. The credibility, the truth, and the dignity of a woman who, until recently, was invisible to everyone's eyes. Clara remained seated, her hands clasped in her lap. Her gaze was fixed on the podium, though her thoughts were elsewhere. It wasn't a victory yet, but it was the recognition that her voice was no longer being ignored. Her story had been heard, and that to her was worth as much as a verdict. Marcelo mentally reviewed every detail of the process, but not with anxiety, rather with the cool composure of someone who knows the terrain they're treading. He knew Ernesto would attempt one last play, perhaps a silent arrangement or some pressure outside the court. That's why he decided to anticipate it. Hours later, already at home, Marcelo received a text message on his phone. It was from an unknown number. I'm willing to negotiate. We can resolve this outside of court. Call me. Marcelo didn't respond. He only showed the message to Clara, who read it with a serene expression. Then she deleted it. He still thinks he can buy us, she said, with a mixture of sadness and firmness. And he'll never understand that you're not for sale, Marcelo replied. The next day, Clara walked through her neighborhood as always. She greeted the neighbors, bought bread at the same bakery as always, crossed the square where she sometimes read in the sun. But this time, something was different. People looked at her with respect. Some approached with simple phrases. I saw what happened. Much courage, Mrs. Clara. It's good that you didn't let yourself be trampled on. She responded with smiles and humble words, but inside she felt a warm light growing, as if the world had returned a piece of herself to her. 2 days later, the courtroom doors reopened. It was the day of the final hearing. Ernesto arrived alone, paler than ever. His dark circles betrayed sleepless nights. He no longer dressed ostentatiously, but with the dull gray of someone who has lost something they don't know how to recover. Marcelo, on the other hand, was serene. Clara, by his side, projected the same dignified calm she had maintained from the beginning. Judge Salazar entered without looking at anyone, with a folder under his arm. He took his seat and began to speak without preamble. After reviewing the additional documentation presented by the defense and considering the plaintiff's background, this court has decided to declare the eviction process null and void. Mrs. Clara Ramirez will remain in her home. In addition, the documents of the complaints will be sent to the public prosecutor's office for formal investigation. The silence was absolute. Not a single murmur, not a clap. Only Clara breathing deeply, containing her emotion, not out of pride, but out of respect for the path she had traveled. Ernesto said nothing. He stood up slowly and left through the same door he had entered so many times with arrogance. This time, no one was watching him. He was no longer the center of the story. As the room emptied, Marcelo and Clara remained for a moment longer. They were in no hurry. It wasn't just the end of a trial, it was the closing of a wound. And even more, the birth of something new. Andres, the bailiff, approached them with a sincere smile. It was an honor to see you fight, Mrs. Clara. I learned more from you than from any lawyer. She gave him a handshake, warm and firm. "Thank you, Don Andres, but I didn't fight alone." And looking at Marcelo, she added, "We fought with the truth, and with that no one can." Outside, the sun was shining brightly. Clara left the building without lowering her gaze, without fear, and without resentment. Because in every step she took, she carried with her something that no one could ever take away from her. Her name. And with it, her dignity intact. The story, which had begun as a simple eviction lawsuit, had transformed into something much more complex. The rumors not only filled the courthouse hallways, but were already circulating on local social media and neighborhood groups. The image of Clara Ramirez and her husband arriving at the courthouse in a Rolls-Royce had become a symbol of unexpected resistance. But for Ernesto Del Valle, that was a threat. He had not only lost control of the case, he was also losing his reputation. And in his world, image was everything. That's why he decided to counterattack. Through his substitute lawyer, an ambitious young man named Rivas, he requested a review of the case. He alleged new documents that supposedly cast doubt on the legitimacy of the payments made by Clara. The judge, pressured by media attention and by an evident desire to close the case definitively, agreed to one last extraordinary hearing. That day, the room was full. Some local media had sent discreet cameras. It was as if everyone was waiting for the outcome of a novel in real time. Clara arrived with a serene step, arm in arm with Marcelo. Although she knew Ernesto would attempt one last play, her heart was calm. There was no fear, only determination. Ernesto, for his part, had abandoned the facade of an elegant man. His face showed clear signs of wear: taut skin, dull eyes, tense voice. "Your Honor," began Rivas, his lawyer, "we request that these receipts be reviewed, as they demonstrate inconsistencies between the payments declared and the actual deposits. According to these records, at least 2 of the months were not paid on time." Marcelo took the floor without altering his tone. "Your Honor, the defense acknowledges that there were payments made 2 or 3 days late, which does not represent a breach of contract, according to Clause 4 of the agreement signed between both parties. Furthermore, the plaintiff never formally notified the tenant of these alleged faults, which invalidates any subsequent claim." The judge leafed through the documents, comparing dates and stamps. The silence grew increasingly dense. Everyone held their breath. "We also present a report from the bank," added Marcelo, "which confirms that the deposits were indeed made, although on variable dates. The total amount is complete." "That doesn't change the fact that the lady didn't respect the original schedule," insisted Rivas, visibly nervous. "The contract establishes clear dates, and it also establishes specific consequences in case of breach," interrupted Marcelo with precision. "None of them were activated by the landlord. There was no notification, no formal penalty. Mr. Del Valle simply waited to accumulate alleged faults to file a lawsuit. That, Your Honor, is not administering a contract. It's manipulating it." The judge looked up. For the first time, he spoke in a more authoritative tone. "Mr. Del Valle, can you explain why you didn't formally notify these alleged delays?" Ernesto did not respond immediately. He looked at his lawyer, then at the judge, and finally at Clara. For a moment it seemed that he was going to tell the truth, but all that came out was a forced sigh. "It was an administrative decision. I didn't think it was necessary at the time." "What you think doesn't replace legal procedure," said the judge coldly. Marcelo took a step forward. "I request, Your Honor, that these new documents be rejected as they are considered untimely, and because the formal channels established in the contract have not been followed." The judge nodded. "The request is valid. The documents will be dismissed." Ernesto sank into his seat. His last resort, his last card, had just been annulled in front of everyone. The room, still silent, seemed to symbolically lean towards Clara. She didn't need to speak. Her silence was her victory. Marcelo took her hand tightly without looking back. They both knew that the final blow had not yet arrived. But it was close, very close. The tension in the room was so thick it felt like the air itself had stopped circulating. Ernesto Del Valle, defeated in his arguments, avoided eye contact. Clara remained serene, but her fingers still intertwined with Marcelo's, as if that connection kept her anchored to reality. It seemed that everything had been said, that the trial was ready to close. But Marcelo, with the same calm that had accompanied him from the start, took one last document from his briefcase. He held it for a few seconds in his hands, without haste, like someone who knows that what they are about to say will change the definitive course of events. "Your Honor," he said in a clear voice, "before this trial concludes, the defense wishes to present one last element. It is not directly related to the payments nor to the contract, but to the integrity of the judicial process itself." The judge looked at him attentively. The audience leaned forward, as if the invisible murmur that united them had stopped suddenly. "We have obtained," continued Marcelo, "a copy of an email sent by Mr. Del Valle to the court's legal assistant, dated 3 weeks before the first hearing. In said email, the plaintiff explicitly mentions his full confidence in the outcome given the years-long relationship with Judge Salazar." A chill ran through the room. Judge Salazar paled immediately. Marcelo handed the document to the court clerk, who read it with wide eyes before passing it to the judge. The silence was absolute. No one dared to move. It was as if everyone was waiting for something to explode. Salazar, with tense hands, read the content of the email. His face, normally hardened by arrogance, was transformed into a mask of discomfort. He looked up and looked at Ernesto, who was now completely distraught. "Can you explain this, Mr. Del Valle?" asked the judge with a slight tremor in his voice. Ernesto stammered. I don't remember sending that. It must have been an exaggeration. A way of speaking." "A way of speaking," repeated Marcelo. "Saying that you have the trial won before even appearing is just a casual expression." Clara watched everything in silence. There was no hatred in her gaze. Only a serene, almost compassionate disappointment. She had expected justice, yes, but she had not wished to see anyone's downfall. Even so, she knew that the truth, when it emerges, does not ask for permission. The judge closed the file abruptly. His voice, when speaking, had lost authority. "This court declares an immediate recess. This information compromises the neutrality of the process, and therefore my continuation in it." Marcelo intervened with a respectful but firm tone. "I request in that case that the file be transferred to an external judge, and that the attempted manipulation by the plaintiff be investigated as well." Salazar nodded, defeated. "It will be done. This hearing is officially suspended." Ernesto did not wait for him to finish the sentence. He picked up his briefcase and left hastily, under the watchful gaze of everyone present. His steps, which had previously resounded with haughtiness, were now barely audible. Marcelo turned to Clara, and for the first time since it all began, he smiled at her with all his heart. "Now yes," he said to her in a low voice, "everything has changed." Clara did not respond. She only hugged him in silence in the middle of the room, while people began to leave slowly. Some approached to give them a word of encouragement. Others only nodded in a sign of respect. But everyone understood that something big had happened. It was not a simple trial one. It was a structure faltering, a truth breaking through the rubble of misused power. And although the case would extend in the administrative realm, in the hearts of all those present, the verdict was already clear. The truth had won. Justice had won. And a humble woman had triumphed thanks to the strength of her character and the love of a man who never left her alone. Clara Ramirez's case did not remain only in the court archives. Her story transcended. It was shared on networks, commented on in radio programs, and replicated in neighborhood meetings. But beyond the media echo, it left a silent and profound mark on all who witnessed it. Clara was not seeking fame. She did not ask for applause. She only wanted to be heard, to be allowed to demonstrate that the truth does not depend on money, nor on status, nor on appearances. She demonstrated that dignity does not need adornments, and that a firm soul can withstand any storm. Marcelo, for his part, returned to anonymity with the same humility with which he appeared. But his gesture of love, of dedication, of standing up for the one he loved, was a living lesson in what it means to be truly present. Together, Clara and Marcelo founded a small organization months later to provide legal advice to low-income seniors. They did it quietly, without grandiloquent speeches, but with real results, because they understood that justice does not always need robes but will. And you who made it this far are also part of this story. Maybe someday you will face an injustice. Maybe you are already facing it. Remember this, you are not alone, your voice matters, your story matters. And no matter how dark the road may seem, there will always be a light if you choose to walk with the truth. If this story touched your heart, like it, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to the channel. Here we tell real, human, and necessary stories. Because justice, like hope, also begins with a person who refuses to give up. Until next time.